All right, this video is about performance and role playing. I didn't care much as a kid about performance from players or GMs. I can speak less about GMs as a kid because I did all the GMing. And at 55 and having played now for a long, long time, I don't care at all about performance. Zero interest in whether my friends as characters are performing. I don't care if they affect the voice. I don't care if they like to physically act it out or whatever. That's their business, but I don't expect it, and it doesn't necessarily enhance my experience as a player. And so as a GM, I would more often than not, go into a voice or even at a table, stand up and maybe uh, pace or walk out the performance. And that was from somebody who really felt that I was obliged to entertain as a GM. I don't feel that way anymore. I haven't felt that way in 8 years, 10 years. I have a particular thing I try to do. My job is not to necessarily to make you laugh or make you excited. It's to present the rules in a game, and obviously you want to engage people through how you deliver information. Show, don't tell. Uh, I avoid exposition dumps and info dumps, and make it live versus passive, make it present versus past. But that's just tools for communication that hopefully invite people to engage in the game. How we communicate might help them engage as characters for a long period of time versus players. But what game we choose will generally affect whether they're players more than characters, uh, a la D20 D&D. They must almost attack the game from a survival point of view as a player trying to keep characters alive. So I don't play D&D that way. I play D&D from a character's perspective and very often end up dead because of it. And therefore I alienate or ultimately condemn the party to death too, because I might be doing something from a character's perspective and not a player's perspective. So I have learned to mitigate that in Todd's games over the last couple of years by saying, I really have to take pause and say, okay, I know my character would do this, but this is not healthy for the party. And I would die a lot in Todd's games because I would act from the character's point of view and not necessarily from a player saying that's just not it's not smart gaming, right? It's your character, but it's not smart D&D gaming, right? And I don't mean D&D fifth edition. I'm just saying old school D20, lethal as hell, right? You have a role to play, cleric, play it, right? Does that mean I can't role play a character as a cleric in D&D? No, again, no. But about performance. So of course you want to engage the players, and you got to remember the players are the audience and we're all the audience of the players. So the whole group is sharing this space. And so when there's somebody there who's really entertaining as a character, really entertaining with a voice, that's great. I think that helps. But I don't expect it from my players. I've never expected it from my players. I want my players involved, engaged, and invested. I would like them in the headspace they appreciate. However, not every game that you play can get them in the headspace they appreciate. Some people want simulationist gaming. Some people they want to just be in character, right? Those are that you might not be able to provide a table that captures both those cats equally, right? So you hope they all can find a happy place at the table to some degree. I, as a player, am looking for a certain headspace. If I get there, in some games I get there a lot easier than others. Some games I get there a lot easier because the group is there. Sometimes I get there a lot easier because how the GM handles information, which I think is number one. How the GM communicates mostly is going to improve probably the place, the headspace I would like to be in. The game system itself might not want me in that headspace because I end up dead or I end up endangering the party. So again, it depends on the genre, it depends on the game's makeup, right? So anyway, my point is performance. As a kid, I might affect a voice a little bit. I might, because we're at a table live, I might get up and move around or something in effect. But generally, I provided information. I think I wasn't about the irony be someone who was wanting to be an actor. somebody who went to acting school, somebody who did some stage stuff and did some drama in high school, and also went to an acting school, did some commercials and a film afterwards. That was performance for me. Role playing was something completely different. But I never really confused the two. But also because gaming for me, there's so much data coming from what I've got to do as an administrator, but also so much data coming in from the players that there was only so much that I could invest myself in an NPC's headspace, right? And be fair to the rules as also able to communicate effectively with the players. It is a balancing act. But at 55, after all these years, I don't care about that now. I care about communicating effectively a certain way that hopefully helps them get into character or be in character or to process the information accurately so they can play the game accurately, right? Um, I might affect the voice so they know it ain't me talking, it's the bartender talking, but I have little interest in animating the bartender beyond that. And I rarely will try to affect a particular voice or accent because I think it's more jarring to people when you do it badly, right? Do I appreciate those who can and do? Of course, it makes it fun, right? A GM who is really good at affecting a voice and play acting, entertaining, damn straight. Do I expect it from my GMs? No. I do not put I'm the one accountable for the quality of experience I generally have as a player. I will usually blame the system if I'm not achieving the place I want to be at the table as far as frustration or how the game itself elicits a particular thing for me as a player that interferes with that process of being where I want to be in the headspace. But for the most part, I don't need a GM to entertain me. I don't need a GM to perform, and I don't need the players with me to perform. I only need the players to care and be invested in what we're doing right this second. And I need them to partake in what we're doing as characters. I don't care if Bill uses a voice or performs. What I do care is that Bill responds to to me as character when I say, I don't believe it's a good idea for us to go behind the king's back. I expect him to respond to me as I'm speaking in character. I expect Bill to respond to me, dude, we have no choice. We have to, Sir William, we have no choice. We must go behind the king's back. The king won't hear it. We have to go to his wife, and his wife will communicate this, and I want that to all be from character perspective, and I want that to be in conversation. So I talked about this and again, the other night, what I'm slowly working toward is I've already admitted I'm semi-retiring from GMing. I will obviously play our games, and that doesn't mean that if somebody if people ask me to play white box or they ask me to run something, of course I would oblige, but I'm not necessarily going to be putting out invites to non-games that aren't necessarily. But it doesn't mean I would not GM if people ask me to GM. But beside the point, my goal is to communicate, and it's to converse, and it's to do such in such a way that they can get into their character's headspace and hopefully be there as long as they want to be. Stay there and make all decisions there as well as they possibly can. That's the goal. And there's a fine line for how we communicate, in which I think that helps. And then the game system, of course, again, can either inhibit that or help that, right? It can get in the way of that or it can help that. And again, there is no way around mechanics. We are gaming. So the best way to go about that is to accept the fact that I can be in character or you can be in character and also roll initiative. And that's something that we just get good at. It's something that we become very good at. I've played with guys who the minute they sit down, and I kid you not, it'll be quiet for them. And they will get into character and they never leave character. That doesn't mean they're talking in accent. That doesn't mean they never leave character for the 4 hour session. Steve and Harold, Robert, Harold and Steve in particular, they would get into character, and all of the game uh, mechanics that came up in play was that was just part of. They just accepted that as part of the reality while they stayed in character, and it just didn't phase them. But this is why Steve and Harold in particular never wanted to try other games. It would be pulling teeth to get those guys to try something, right? OSRs, D20, okay, but they were very, it was difficult to get them to try the games. And why? Because they wanted to be, they enjoyed that particular style of game. They enjoyed that particular rule set. They enjoyed that fantasy structure, whatever genre. But what they mostly enjoyed was they knew how to stay in character and apply mechanics or play with the assumption that we are characters but are aware of the dangerous spaces we reside in. And this was new to me. This was that, we never had these conversations. So with my local longtime group, we didn't sit around and talk about role playing theories and styles and techniques. Never did that. We just played and we didn't care, or I didn't think we cared, right? Our biggest arguments and debates were over, let's try this game or let's take a break, guys. I'm kind of tired of running, what was it? I was running the longest time, white box basic fantasy. Let's try this. And the biggest argument, no, we don't want to mess with that. So, but it was never about techniques or role playing styles or, right? It was just kind of a natural fit. You find a group where it's just natural communication, natural, attention to detail, attention to engagement, etc. But my point was never about actual role play as performance for me or for them, right? And that's because we're older, and that's because that's not what was required for us to be in character. Nor was it required for us to be entertained by the group or entertained by the GM, right? I believe that's much of your own responsibility. If you're bored at a table, right, don't expect the five people there to somehow entertain you or make you not bored. You might want to ask your question, why are these people boring? If you're bored with them or you're bored with the game you're playing or something, but ultimately, if you're bored, and my father used to always say this, if you're bored, there's something wrong with you. There ain't nothing wrong with the world. There's something wrong with you if you're bored, right? So don't be bored. And I think boredom starts with not being engaged in what you're choosing to do, finding a hurdle that you just won't jump, right? The guy at the table who says, "Man, I don't like the way this guy starts the session off," and that instantly becomes a wall and a block, and they're not going to ever get engaged. Instead of saying, all right, focus on what's happening in game, and all of that shit will dissipate. It'll fold away. Now, if there's somebody abusive or somebody who refuses to be in character, somebody's flipping through books or on a phone or whatever, who constantly calls you Jason instead of your character's name, these things can ultimately spoil the soup, right? Can spoil the magic circle, so to speak, right? So for me, it's of late, especially since all the work on Drunken Man was really about how to change my perspective as a GM, but also how to communicate or try to communicate in such a way that the players had more um, power over being in character, but also in a way having some say as to the world around them, right? Adding or putting something there that I might not have said, or that might not it might not be a given, or it might be a given, right? But it's been really about communication for me as a GM, mostly, and about as a player, right? As a player, learning to say, can I be in character regardless of how much mechanics come in here? Can I even use, am I all right, which is staying in character and talking about the mechanics? Okay, you're surprised. Would it bother me if a GM says, "All right, guys, you've lost initiative. These goblins come storming out of the darkness." I prefer a GM describes to me what happens to us, then says, "You've lost surprise." Right? How he describes it kind of informs us, oh, we must have been surprised, right? But I don't mind a GM confirming, by the way, guys, no initiative this turn. You've been surprised by these goblins. But I like them showing me the goblins have jumped out of the darkness and gotten the jump on our group. Instead of just saying, okay, guys, there's a bunch of goblins. Let's roll for surprise. Okay, you're surprised. No initiative. Goblins get to go first. That sucks, right? That, by the way, I have been known to do because you get caught up in just the minutia of the game. So that's about engagement. If I'm engaged at a GM, I'm not just saying, okay, guys, there's goblins here. Let's roll initiative. That's board game talk, right? But it can happen to the best of us, and often does, depending on whether we are engaged in our own fiction, our own headspace, right? So the point is, this was about performance. I have never been one to get excited about having to perform as a GM, although it doesn't mean I didn't, and I didn't do it more in the past than I do now. As a player, I'm definitely interested in being in character, making character decisions, which tends to be, in a way, I think, entertaining for the group at the table. That becomes, in a way, a performance by just being authentic and true to my character. I don't have to put on a voice. I don't have to act out something. I notice that when I do an act from my character's personality and perspective, I think everybody's more engaged. I think everybody enjoys that more. I wouldn't call it performance. They might say, "I love the way you play your character, Jay. It's a great performance." But I do believe acting from my character's perspective, being in character and being authentic to the character tends to engage everybody in who is this crazy guy or who is this guy who's that way, who is this guy who talks shit all the time, who whatever the person is, right? By never leaving that, so to speak. And I don't mean never, never. I mean my when I come from my character's perspective, that's who they are, right? So do I consider that performance? No, I guess we could define performance as being engaged and authentic to your character in every aspect of play. And maybe we could call that performing. But I mean acting. I mean acting out, taking on voices. I don't expect my GM to entertain me that way. I don't expect the players at my table to do that for me as a player, nor as a G for me as a GM. I expect them to be engaged, invested, and right, hopefully handling the game from a character's point of view first. Even in this, I want I want my players to be their character first. I want them less concerned about the trap on the door. Does that mean Sam is the thief in character, is aware there's trapped doors in the world? Of course he is. So Sam, as the thief, is going to say, "Hey, hey, whoa, 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 stand back from that door. I'm gonna look this over for I'm looking for traps, right?" And the GM says it doesn't appear as if there are any, right? As the GM makes the failed roll, right? And Sam said, "Well, I think I'll go ahead and is this pick this lock, right, or whatever the case may be." You want them get invested in being a character that's aware of the world around them being dangerous, not a player trying to mitigate damage or mitigate or create a win situation, a win scenario. So that's where that player stuff comes from, right? They're trying to game the game. They're trying to game the system and get a winning situation, a winning hand. That I don't really appreciate. I don't really enjoy. That doesn't mean characters aren't smart, strategic, and intelligent about the dangerous world they live in which a character from their perspective says, "Hey, I don't think we should go through that door right now. That's my life at stake here, Sir Jerome. I don't want to go through that door right now, right?" And they all debate going through that door right now, right? Hopefully, from their character's perspective, right? So anyway, my point is, at this age, at this ripe age in the hobby, for me, I have zero interest in performing as a GM or as a player. I'm invested in communication. And the two big ones, probably should have made a video about this. What are the two most important things to me now as a gamer, as either a player or GM? Communication, right? And I forgot the other one. Communicate. Oh my God, communication and oh my God, conversation. Gee, Christmas, the two C's. How are we communicating, right, effectively to make the thing work the way we all need it to work for the best headspace? And I want it to be conversational, right? Not so much me telling a story as the GM. I talk for 10 straight minutes and then say, "What do you want to do?" That I do not want to do anymore. However, I have to talk enough to communicate effectively what they find themselves in. But hot potato that, get it back to the players so they in character can respond to the data. Um, I wish I could look back on some of the videos that were up with the old channel from years ago and see the difference between, what I did mechanically then, how I communicated then, and whether people liked it more. Maybe they did. I don't know. But I know this. I remember there were times I would communicate beyond a point of no return, meaning I would overly describe something and run past the space in which a player would want to engage in the space. So this is what I mean by communication. If I tell you all the stuff you need to know about the beach and then get out of your way so you can make decisions with that data. Okay, there's some caves ahead of us. There's an old ruin down the beach here. There's a cove on the shoulder, beyond the shoulder of mountains there. north up the beach, and there's clearly evidence of fishing and some fishing going on here, but no people. You get all that data, and then you can decide, well, I'm going to go check out the cave, or we're going to build a camp, we're going to go check out the ruins, and I'm out of the way. But if I communicate beyond that, and I keep telling you about the jungle and the mountains and the whatever a character wants to engage in, we're so far past it, they can't now, they have to retcon back to say, Dina's going to make a camp. Oh, right, I went too far. You guys are in the, I've now taken control of your characters purely by over describing the space, not by railroading you. But I don't realize that I've said so much that I've kind of moved you through time and space, and you want to go back and retcon getting out of the boat, right? So there is this fine line, and that's what I mean when I say most important to me is how I communicate as a GM. Hopefully, how a GM communicates with me, so I can be in character. And if a GM goes too far or says too much, I can't respond to something that's titillated my imagination. What? You mentioned a what in the corner? Wait, retcon that back 10 minutes. You said something about a thing in the corner. Now I'm having to ask questions. Did you mention something in the corner as opposed to me going, I'm going to head over to that and grab that key out of the corner, right? Pick up that key off the floor, right? I have to come back and say, did you say there was a key in the corner? Now I'm asking questions because he went too far too fast. So these were things I've been trying to improve myself personally. And of course, I want it to be conversational, right? And this has been my hiccup, man, since I read Traveler. It's been my hiccup since I would say it's been this thing that needles me in the back of the mind now that I love the idea of six adults sitting around a table. Yes, one is the GM, is the game master, the referee, the official, the authority that has the the and the others are players in a dangerous time in a place in a world or whatever the space is, but that it is a conversation. And this is something that is difficult to do online because we're all these little heads and little windows, or worse, where there's no heads at all. We're looking at a map on Roll20 or a map in Foundry and communicating. You can't make eye contact. I can't make eye contact with John to know John wants to say something here before me. So I have to step on John. And then when John goes, he starts to speak. And like, oh, well, go ahead, John. You go first, man. I really don't have a good idea here. Right. I'm stepping all over John, which takes me out of character, takes us out of the space, but it's polite gaming. Meanwhile, if I'm looking at faces, I can see that John's got an idea. John might send a signal to the group with an eyebrow up and maybe do this, and I can pause to let John step into the conversation. Can't do that the way we play on Wednesday nights because we don't use video. And so it makes communication effectively more difficult, right? So, and it is less conversational that way, right? So, but that's just the trappings of using online play, right? But anyway, I want to talk about this because I don't buy into performance as being relevant anymore to me as a GM or as a player. I don't think players have to perform. I don't think GMs have to perform. It doesn't enhance necessarily the experience for me, especially if they're bad at it. If they're really bad at doing it, or they put on some affected high-pitched squealing voice to play their halfling. More often than not, I'm going to be sick and tired of listening to their ass after 2 hours, right? So I'd rather they just make it clear they're talking in character, right? I've played with some people that are in character the whole time and never affect the voice, and I've had trouble recognizing whether it's them saying it or their character saying it. So I very often will attempt to affect a voice just enough so people know I'm in character. Just go a little deeper or something like that. But but I've played with guys who were in character the whole damn session, and I didn't know when they were in character or when they were not in character. One of these people was Aaron. Early in my Skype gaming, I played with Jim and Rich and Aaron. And Aaron was one of those guys that was in character, but I couldn't tell from his voice. So I would very often misunderstand. I thought it was Aaron saying something. It was his character saying something, or vice versa. I would think it was right. His character saying something was Aaron saying something. So he just seemed to be in character the whole time, and I didn't pick up on it right all the time. Uh, which was partially because we were in the dark on Skype. There was just voices. There were no faces, so to speak. But the point is, I have played with guys that were fully invested in character And because there wasn't a lot of performance, I didn't always recognize when they were in or out of character, right? And that was, again, I'd only been a player for a very short time in my life at that point. So I'd only been on the other side of the table. And as a GM, I just facilitate. If you speak to me in character, then I'm fine with that. If you speak to me in character to an NPC, I'll respond back as an NPC. But I never cared if you were speaking to me in character or not in character as a GM. I just was facilitating the game and communicating as effectively as I could with the players. And that still are the two most important things, communication and conversation. Can it be more of a conversation with adults? And are we communicating effectively enough that they can be in the headspace that I prefer as a player, which is in character as character? And I'm assuming they would prefer. However, not everybody wants to be in character as player, right? Many of them want to be in character in character as character. They want to be in character as player. And again, I think most of my colleagues who play OD20 are toward the latter, in character as player. They are effectively, completely, and utterly aware of the probabilities of success and the probabilities of what's around the corner, what's going to happen. They are weighing the success probabilities of their characters winning a battle with the dragon that they now know is around the corner of the cave, right? They're, you know, how they say that out loud in character. I'm not taking on no goddamn dragon. I'm not ready for this. That effectively communicates that their character is not ready for this. Their character physically is not ready for this. That works for me, as opposed to the conversation about, well, I've got a 6x8 magic sword that I think should be able to penetrate a dragon's armor. And Bill's going, dude, I've got 5 spells that do 5 plus D6 damage. I don't want to hear all that. You know, I don't, and I think that's difficult for a lot of players in D&D, fifth edition, right? So anyway, point is about performance. I don't care anymore. I never did. I think I tried because I think that's what people expected of me as a GM, to be entertaining. And now I'm too damn old I'm old enough now to say, oh no, it's not my responsibility. Effective communication will engage them. Narrating the proper stuff in the proper manner will engage them. Telling them they are being attacked by goblins, by defining it and making to hit rolls and saying you feel a stab in the ribs, or you're overwhelmed by a pack of goblins, and telling them who's hit and who's not hit, etc. And then they all go, "What the hell, dude? You were surprised." I shouldn't have to even tell them they were surprised. If I tell them the story of the goblins waylaying them and 3 of them have been wounded, they know they were surprised and they know they've been hit. I showed them, I did not tell them. And therefore, now let's roll initiative, right? So, and then we're into the traditional mechanics, right? Okay. But performance has been one of those things that's completely dropped out of my want now, completely. I don't feel like I owe it to players. I don't feel like as a player I owe it to the group. I think being a character invested in the game will be, in and of itself, authentic and rewarding and performance enough. And I think that's fair to say of all my colleagues around the table. All right.